Imagine training for 4 years for a single tournament. Imagine crossing an international border just to practice. Imagine your fans buying flights, hotels, and tickets, only to have those tickets ripped away days before kickoff. Imagine your players standing in front of cameras, publicly describing visa delays that threatened their ability to even board a plane to the host country. Now imagine all of that leading to a single moment. One goal, one net, one eruption of joy that lasts exactly 90 seconds before a screen lights up and a flag goes up, and everything, every sacrifice, every border crossing, every sleepless night of logistical chaos collapses into a thin red line on a VAR monitor. That's not a football story. That's something else entirely. And to understand why this moment hit differently, why Iran's exit from this World Cup feels unlike almost any other elimination in recent tournament history, you need to go back, not to the 94th minute, not even to the first whistle. You need to go back to before this tournament began, to the moment it became clear that Iran would be competing under conditions no other qualified nation had to face. Well, let's start with the match itself, because what unfolded on the pitch genuinely deserves its own chapter before we pull back to the bigger picture. Iran needed a win against Egypt to finish second in Group G and secure their place in the round of 32. Egypt needed, at minimum, a draw to advance alongside Belgium. Both sides had everything to play for, and the match played out exactly like you'd expect from two teams with that much at stake, tight, physical, and largely without the kind of clear-cut chances that settle things early. For 93 minutes, neither side could find a decisive breakthrough. The kind of draw that sends one team through and eliminates the other looked increasingly inevitable. Then, deep into stoppage time, Iran's number 4 found the net. What followed was one of those moments that makes football what it is. Players sprinting toward the corner flag, a bench emptying onto the pitch, coaches and substitutes colliding in celebration, an entire stadium section erupting, the kind of release that only comes after 90-plus minutes of sustained tension, when a result that changes everything suddenly feels real and certain and done. It lasted 90 seconds. Referee Shimon Marciniak consulted VAR, returned to the center of the pitch, and delivered the verdict in 4 words. Goal from offside position. The celebration stopped, the players froze, and in the Egyptian technical area, head coach Hossam Hassan, who had reportedly been on his knees in apparent prayer during the review, understood what the decision meant for his side. Egypt held on. A 1-1 draw. They advanced to the round of 32 alongside Belgium. Iran went home. The margin that determined everything was, by every account from those watching the broadcast, almost invisible. World Feed commentator Conor McNamara described the swing of emotion in real time. His co-commentator, Matt Holland, noted there was barely anything separating an onside and offside position. Two of the most experienced voices covering this tournament looked at the same frame-by-frame footage and couldn't point to a clear, obvious answer. That's how fine the line was. And that line ended Iran's World Cup. Here's what you need to understand about Iran's campaign at this World Cup. The VAR call was the ending of a story that had been building for weeks. And that story has almost nothing to do with football. No team at the 2026 World Cup arrived under conditions remotely comparable to what Iran had to navigate just to be on that pitch. While other nations settled into American training facilities, established their routines, and focused entirely on tactics and recovery, Iran was operating from a different country altogether. Because of the political and diplomatic complexity surrounding Iran's relationship with the United States as host nation, the squad based its entire World Cup preparation not in America, but in Mexico. Every training session, every tactical meeting, every recovery day happened across an international border from the stadiums where they were competing. That's not a footnote. That's a fundamental disruption to the kind of tournament preparation that elite football demands. And the travel situation made it worse. Initial reports indicated the team would only be permitted to enter the United States a very short window before each of their scheduled matches. That meant the squad wasn't just based in Mexico. They were crossing back and forth, repeatedly managing international travel logistics around match days in a way that no other team at this tournament had to consider. There was some relief on this front eventually. On June 23rd, the U.S. Department of Homeland security announced it would ease travel restrictions for Iran's national team, specifically allowing the squad to enter the country 2 days before their match against Egypt. 2 days. That was presented as an improvement, and compared to what came before, it was. But 2 days is still a dramatically compressed window compared to the preparation time other nations built into their schedules as a matter of course. At the level of football being played at this World Cup, preparation time isn't a comfort. It's a competitive variable. Rest, recovery, tactical sessions, acclimatization, these things matter in matches, decided by margins as small as the one that ended Iran's tournament. Every extra hour of preparation that other teams had and Iran didn't is an hour that compounds across a full group stage campaign. The travel and training disruption wasn't the only source of friction. For Iran heading into this tournament, it wasn't even close to the full picture. Iran's official ticket allocation for the tournament was revoked just days before the competition began. Think about what that means in practice. Supporters who had spent months planning for this, who had booked flights, arranged accommodation, taken time off work, and built their summer around the possibility of watching their national team compete at a World Cup on American soil, suddenly found themselves holding plans that no longer had a destination. These weren't people who could easily adjust. International travel at that scale involves commitments made months in advance. The revocation of those tickets didn't just inconvenience Iranian supporters. For many, it ended their World Cup experience before it had started, leaving them to watch from home, while other national fan bases filled stadiums around them. That detail matters because fan support at a World Cup isn't just atmosphere. It's part of the experience that players carry with them. When Mehdi Taremi or Alireza Jahanbakhsh looked into those stadiums, they weren't seeing the traveling support that other nations brought with them. They were seeing what was left after a decision made far above the level of football stripped away their own fan base's access. Taremi and Jahanbakhsh both went further than that. Both players spoke publicly and on record about visa delays and entry restrictions that created additional difficulty for the squad in the lead up to matches. When players at international level use their own names to describe logistical problems affecting their tournament preparation, it tells you something important. The disruption was serious enough that staying quiet about it was no longer an option. These are not players who speak to cameras lightly. These are experienced internationals who understand the scrutiny that comes with representing their country on the global stage. The fact that they felt compelled to raise these issues publicly during a tournament speaks to how significant the impact was on the squad's day-to-day reality. There's one more layer to Iran's tournament that needs to be said directly, because it puts everything else into a different kind of perspective. Iran's players stepped onto the pitch at this World Cup wearing pins bearing the number 168. That number represents the victims of the Minob school attack back home, a tragedy that struck while the squad was in the middle of their tournament campaign. These were men carrying genuine grief into competition, representing not just a football federation but a nation processing loss, while simultaneously managing travel restrictions, visa uncertainty, and a fan base that couldn't get through the door. When you hold all of that together, the training camp in Mexico, the border crossings, the revoked tickets, the public visa statements, the 168 pins, the 94th minute, VAR call stops being a football moment and becomes something that lands on top of weeks of accumulated weight. Yes, almost certainly yes. VAR exists precisely to adjudicate margins that are invisible to the human eye in real time. The process applied to Iran's disallowed goal was the same process applied to every other similar decision at this tournament. Offside law doesn't have a clause for context. It doesn't account for where a team trained or how long they waited at a border crossing. It measures position at the moment the ball is played, and it does so with the same precision, regardless of everything else surrounding the match. The call was technically correct, the process was followed properly, the officiating standard was consistent, and none of that makes the outcome feel anything less than brutal to the people who lived it. That tension between a decision that was right by the rules and a situation that was fundamentally unequal by any reasonable measure is exactly what makes Iran's exit from this World Cup worth examining honestly. A team can be eliminated fairly under the laws of the game while simultaneously having competed under conditions that were unfair by the standards of basic sporting equity. Both of those things are true here. At the same time, about the same result. FIFA has spent months promoting the 2026 World Cup under the banner of football uniting the world. And for the majority of the 48 competing nations, that framing probably captured something real about the experience. But for a specific group of teams, the lived reality of competing here involved navigating political complexity, unequal access, and logistical obstacles that had nothing to do with football and everything to do geopolitics. Iran trained in a different country, lost their fan tickets, had their players publicly flag visa problems, pinned 168 names to their chests in grief, and then watched their World Cup end on the finest of offside margins in the 94th minute of their final group game. Whether FIFA addresses any of this formally, whether Iran's federation pursues any kind of review or appeal, whether any of the broader questions about unequal tournament conditions get serious attention, those are questions for the days ahead. What's already clear is that Iran leaves this World Cup with a story that can't be reduced to a VAR decision. It's a story about what it costs some nations just to show up, and about what happens when the game's governing body promotes unity while some of its members are crossing international borders just to get to training. The football was real, the offside was real, and so was everything that came before it.